We just finished Optimize, where we went from 20 to 49 employees. And so now we graduate to 50 to 100. Anywhere in here would apply to your business, but basically you graduate once you pass 100 employees here. And so the theme is Categorize. So headcount 50 to 99, your role is that you are now an executive in the business. And so we'll talk about kind of the layers that kind of exist now.
Yeah, so a lot of times what happens at this level is you actually form, or at least you'd like to form, 3 layers of leadership. And so what that looks like is at the very bottom of your organization, you have your individual contributors, right? Those are people that don't manage people, they're just operating independently. Above those people, you have managers, and that's your first line of management, so the least experienced management team that you have. Above that management team, those managers roll into what we call, most companies, directors. And then above those directors, what forms at this level and what you typically see when you're at this size company is that you have an executive team. Now, that executive team is usually not fully built out at this point. People are usually more strategic with hiring, say, 2 or 3, even 1 executive, depending on your business and where you need leverage. So an example is in our first business, Gym Launch, we actually ended up hiring a CFO as our first executive because we needed somebody who could help manage inventory, work with legal, and basically redo our finance department because those were things that we didn't like and they were not our skill. And so a lot of the times selecting who's going to be your executive team depends on your business, what your business needs, and what your strengths and weaknesses are as the leader of the company. And so the second piece to this is that oftentimes what happens at this point is that whether you're informally or formally decided, you as the founder or one of the founders kind of becomes the CEO. And so that's something that a lot of people don't formally identify with, but a lot of the times at this point in the business, what you'll see is that if somebody doesn't really identify with that role, then there's a gap in leadership. And so that's what it usually looks like at this point: managers, directors, executive team. Again, not usually fully built out. Even the directors team at this point, a lot of times you're missing a couple of them, but that's okay because as you scale up, you will fill out those teams.
And so to put this in perspective, we had 30 million businesses total in the US. There's only 1.2 million businesses that actually get to this level. So you're looking at like 3 to 4% of all businesses, which already only 9% of people own a business. So 9% of people own a business, and of those 9, 3 to 4% get to this level. So you're in rarefied air. So if you are here, congratulations. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is start with the constraints of product and what we need to do to graduate. And so reminder, product is services, goods, and results that you deliver. And so the constraints at this level are that product becomes outdated, right? Because you've probably been doing this for multiple years at this point. Improvements are beginning to take too long to roll out. And so to graduate, you have to begin fixing one problem at a time with focused feature-specific teams. All right, and so this is what that looks like. So it's ruthless focus on the problem that yields the biggest reward, not the easiest one to solve. I love this story from the GitHub founder. He would come on, and rather than doing this massive onboarding, he just asked what were the top 100 problems that people complained about for the system. And so he brought the whole engineering team on and he said, we're just gonna solve this problem today. And they didn't do anything until they solved that problem. And then they just kept going. And then finally, they would solve the second problem. And what's interesting is that we have this fallacy of concurrent thinking, which is that, theoretically, we should be able to execute 5 things at the same time and get them done in 1/5 the time. But in fact, it takes like 5 times the amount of time as if you had just done it sequentially or chronologically, because the cost of switching is real. And so people don't work that way. And so putting all of the company's resources on one problem then creates the urgency from the fact that all these other problems exist to get that problem done quickly. This one, one problem, one team, one measurable objective. The idea here, so this comes from Peter Thiel. I mean, his team has talked about this, he talks about it, but he was just ruthless in trying to make sure that people only solved one problem. That was it. For the same exact reasons that people have a very hard time splitting focus. And a split focus is like 1/5 as effective, not half as effective between 2 traits. And the thing is that works company-wide. And so fundamentally at this level, it's very easy to describe this. It's like we just did a quarterly with our largest portfolio company, and we spent the whole day just to say, this is the one thing that we're going to do. Yeah. And it's hard, like I want to be able to describe this to you, but I could just tell you that like at the end of the day when that happened, the whole team was like, wow, we get it. And so I'm trying to like bring this to you like right now, if you're like, oh, we've got these 5 objectives and we've got these sub-objectives, it's like you actually haven't prioritized. And that is the job, is that there are many things that are important, but if you can't say this is the most important and then we will do this first, then you haven't done your job.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times what happens is as the team gets bigger, you think, well, now I have executives, now I have directors, like we should be capable of doing more things. It's not about doing more things at the same time. It's about being able to do more things over the span of a year or 2 years with ruthless focus on the sequence and focusing on one thing at a time. So I think that a lot of the times the reason that there's this illusion that now that we have more leaders, we're going to have more capability of doing that because we have more people and more leaders. But the reality is that it's still one company and the departments are still pulling from resources that you may not even know about. And so there's an example, which is, earlier today was on a meeting with our team and we had, a big problem that we're like, this is the first thing we're going to solve. And the way that I plan my time is I'm focused on that problem this week. And someone said, you know what, actually, we should start really thinking about this right now. So should we use the rest of the meeting to talk about this other problem? I said, oh, no. Even though this problem we now have solved and now we just need to go execute the plan, if we start on the next problem, people are going to have split attention. So something that you want to think about is it's not just the resources and the time, it's the attention of the team. Where's their discretionary effort going? And this is something that we're both ruthless with in terms of how we use our time. We have very different roles in the company, but we both are very particular about what we focus on because the value of having all of your discretionary effort, all of your shower time, all of your dinner conversation to one thing, you're going to solve that thing in a third or a fourth of the time than if you were to spread out your attention over all of these other things. And so it's almost like you have to be able to put blinders on and then also help your team put the blinders on so that they're focused on that one problem and they will solve it in such a shorter period of time. And so again, just because you have the time and the people doesn't mean you have the attention.
And so at this point, we graduate from product being outdated, improvements taking too long to roll out, to fixing one problem at a time with a focused feature-specific team. So it's like, okay, this is the one big objective. Now, if we say, okay, risk is our biggest objective that we need to tackle, well, there's going to be components to that. There's going to be like, okay, what is our messaging on email? What is our webinar language? What does our telemarketing look like? Like all of these are going to have kind of tendrils attached to them, but you want to be able to actually go deep on them. And my little litmus test for you is that you probably had 5 goals last year. And then when you looked at your goals this year, you probably didn't accomplish them. And so as much as you're like, well, I could just do all 5, and why would I want to wait? Because we could just do all 5 by the end of the year will come and you will not have done them.
There's a quote that has always stuck with me when it comes to building a company, and it really resonates with companies of this size, which is companies die from the inside out, not from the outside in. And so most companies, the reason that they don't succeed is not because of like the external market force or the economy or the weather or anything else happening. It's how they organize themselves internally. And most companies die from indigestion, not starvation, meaning they try to take on too much rather than too little, and that starts with product.
And that's why the big prioritization, you're gonna have one thing that you're going after. It's just that thing, when you get to a bigger company, is a bigger thing. And that's really the difference. So it's not like, oh, we have all these capabilities, we should be able to do 5 things. You have all these capabilities, you should be able to do one bigger thing.
To give an example of that, we have a portfolio company right now, and that one big thing is we are changing from a service company to a software company. And so it's really like, we're not going to try and do more upsells. We're not going to raise the price. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to transition from a service company to a SaaS company. And that is the focus. And it's like, all right, that might take 18 months, 24 months that we have to do that one thing and nothing else that is going to get in the way. I will say there's always the unspoken sixth, which is like, keep running the business and making money and doing all of those things. But priorities wise, like that's the number one priority and everything revolves around that. And as tempting as it is to capitalize on all these other opportunities that keep popping up for the business, we just remain ruthlessly focused on that one thing.
And to put your mind at rest as the entrepreneur, if you are like, wait, we're not gonna tackle all of these other things that I see as mini priorities, or they're important but not as important. The thing is that, and I've learned this the hard way, when I would leave a business alone, it would almost always just invariably do better. And so whenever you change stuff, you guarantee a cost of change. You don't guarantee the upside of improvement. But every time you change something, everyone basically has to reset at zero, relearn the new process, relearn the new whatever it is. And so the fact that you are deploying all of your new or discretionary effort and resources towards this one problem, the rest of the team that's kind of like making the sausage, transacting every single day, they just get better and better at their jobs because you're finally just like letting them breathe. And so some problems do end up just solving themselves. And so you end up making up an efficiency in the normal business, what you thought you were going to have to do through brute forcing it. This is something I've seen myself. All right, so from there, that's what we have to do for product. So what do the constraints look like for marketing at this level? So lead flow becomes volatile because you only have one way to get customers. So this is usually in the 1 to 2 million a month-ish range, where you get to this point. And you obviously know how to do something. You know one channel pretty well. When you have lots of volume, tiny changes, it's like, oh, our lead flow is down 20%. It's like, oh shoot, well that's 4 sales guys who don't have empty calendars now. And so like the volatility of a couple percentage points when you're small, you barely notice. When you're big, those couple percentage points make huge swings in the business. And so to graduate, you want to fund a second acquisition channel with a referral process and track it, which I'll explain in a second. You want to have segmented lead nurture by lead score, which I'll also break down. And then you want to pick the most similar platform or do a new core for. So I'll walk through like how do we prioritize what platform we're going to go as our second platform for acquisition. So one of the hardest transitions in business is adding the second channel. So I want to be really clear about this. It's one of the biggest risks, but it has one of the highest upsides. So let me explain. So if you think about decreasing risk and increasing upside, then a second acquisition channel kind of checks both boxes. Because now if you go from 1 to 2, you're split in terms of where your customers are going. You don't have one itis. You're not reliant on one thing. So that decreases risk in the business. Good thing. But on top of that, if this stays the same, which I'm going to walk through how to do that, then all of this is just gravy. You can double the business and make it less risky at the same time. So it's one of the most powerful moves you can do in business, but there's a reason that we wait until we're at Category 7, hurricane, until we're at this stage to basically make this bet, because it will drain resources and it will take significantly more time than you expect. All right, and so I like to frame it like this, which is that this is an investment. If I were to say to you, hey, give me 500 grand, and in a year, you'll have a second acquisition channel that's profitable and equal to your current one, would you make that trade? At this level, 500 grand, you should absolutely do that. Like, there's basically no way that you wouldn't do that trade. You say that. And then as soon as you spend your first month of ads on a new platform, you spend 10 grand and then you make $0 back. And then you do it a second month, you're like, ads don't work for me. All right. And so I would encourage you to say, like, don't think that, because the way it's going to feel, or the way it's going to actually happen, is like you spend 10, you lose 10. 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 You spend 10, you make 5. You spend 10, you make 25. You spend 10, you make 50. And then you're like, holy shit. And then that 1 month, you made back all the losses you had, but it took you 8 months to get there, or 9 months to get there. That's what the experience is. And so you just have to focus on moving the dial one at a time down the pipeline. Are we getting clicks? Are we getting opt-ins? Okay, we're getting opt-ins. Are they scheduling? No, they're not scheduling. All right, let's improve this. Let's improve the offer on that page. Okay, they're scheduling now. We're getting on the phone. They're not showing. Okay, how do we improve our lead nurture? You just keep pushing it along until eventually you're like, we're getting on the phone with the right people. Holy cow. And then you've created a second channel. So expect a 12-month delay for the return. Doubles acquisition, it can reduce risk. The intervention story, when we started doing outbound as our second main channel for Gym Launch, to give you context on this, it took I think 3 months for us to get our first sale from outbound. And at month 6, my entire executive team did a little mini intervention and was like, hey Alex, I think this might be a shiny object. I think we should just focus on the main thing. Trying to use my language against me. But I was like, no, because the thing is that they weren't close enough to see the progress. And so I was like, no, we figured out the list thing. So we're getting the list, we're enriching the data. And okay, now we figured out the pickup problem. So we know how the best times of day and how to wrap our phone number so we can come from a local area code. Okay, we did that. Okay, now we're getting pickups. Okay, and then we couldn't get the script right to get them to book a call. So we got the script right and the offer. So now they're booking calls. Okay, cool. But now they're not showing up for those calls. So we had to figure out, so the team just saw zeros over and over and over again in terms of sales. They saw the money that was going into it, but they didn't see the progress along the way. And so as long as you can see progress, I would say keep going.
And I would say that at this point, what you want to recognize too is some of the dynamics that are happening, which is a lot of the team that you have now, they are people that are great at growing a business and iterating on what exists, but they may not be people that can go from 0 to 1. And it's really good to understand the people on your team. It's best if on a new initiative, like when you're spinning up a new channel, you put somebody who's a good 0 to 1. They can create something from nothing, versus taking someone who's a 5 to 10 who likes to iterate on an already existing idea and then say, hey, go do this thing, create something out of nothing. Those people get very anxious. They say, oh, it's not going to work. They speak a lot of doubt into it. And so just recognize too, if you have people that are consistently doubting something new, they're probably not 0 to 1 people.
Okay, so cash flow the transition. You're like, okay, well, this is going to be a big bet. So what we want to do at this stage is create space. We want to create padding for the bet. And so the two main thing are referrals and segmented nurture, all right? And so from a cash flow perspective, we're going to get more out of what we already have, right? And so how do we put a really strong and sexy referral play? And I'll cover that in a second. And then with our lead scoring that you should already have lead scoring at this point. If you don't have lead scoring, please strongly consider scoring your leads by who they are, what they've done, and where they came from. But once you have that and you're feeding them to the best sales guys, instead of blasting your list 3 times a week, you can say, oh, we have 6 pockets of leads. We should delineate what messages go to which leads. All right. And so from a referral perspective, these are the 7 plays. This is directly from the $100 million leads book. But these are all plays that I have done that worked. So these are not theory. These are the actual ones. So really simply, a one-sided referral benefit is that you pay your average CAC to the referrer. And so what's weird is that we're really happy to pay Zuckerberg or Sundar or whoever, Google's, right? We're really happy to pay them like $3,000 for a new customer, but we're not willing to pay our customers $3,000 for a customer. And a referral is going to be way more likely to stick, way more likely to refer another customer. They say yes at higher prices, they convert better, they stay longer, all those benefits. And for some reason, we're not willing to do that. So just look at your CAC and just say, I'll give you that. Don't do 20% or 50%, just pay them what you would pay somebody else. And you'd be amazed how much that works. Now, the second is two-sided. Now, this takes that concept, and I like this much better, which is the math is the same, except I split it between 2 people. And so this way, it's like, I think about this as relational capital. If I'm going to go to Jason and say, hey, Jason, you should come join this thing, or you should check out this software or whatever, if he knows that I'm getting this big nut for doing it, he might be like, wait, are you just doing this to make money off of me? And so it doesn't look as cool. And so if I'm like, dude, if you come through me, you get 20% off. You can't get 20% off anywhere else. And it's like, oh, cool, thanks, man. So he gets 20% off, I get 20% of the revenue overall, everybody wins. And so I like two-sided benefits for referrals. The next is just tactically, I've told this story before, but we had a sales guy who came in at one of our portfolio companies, outperformed everyone, like doubled the top sales guy. And he was getting the same number of leads as everyone else. We're like, what is this guy doing? And so I hopped on. So I'm like going down 2 levels into like the manager's meeting of a portfolio. Anyways. And so he was like, I just asked him if they want to bring somebody else. And just by doing that, he was able to double the sales. And so it's these basics that we forget to do. But the thing is at this level, you need to build some padding because you're going to be dumping cash into this new channel. It's not going to work. So it's like, all right, we're going to get some more referrals. We're going to ask for them on the sales call. If you have people who are coming in and want discounts, you can also use that as a bartering chit. So it's basically like, hey, can I get 10% off? It's like, well, I can't give you 10% off just because you've got a pretty face. But what I can do is if you bring a friend or 2 friends or give me 3 leads, I'm happy to give you that 10% once they transition over, right? Or basically you look at this one-sided referral CAC and say, well, I'll do you one better. You want 10%, I'll give you $3,000 off when you bring somebody in, right? And so both of these are sales team oriented. This is just kind of you as a business owner in terms of what you're thinking about. Number 5 is referral events themselves, which is just actually having a cadence for doing this. You can run 1 a quarter, you bring customers together, bring clients together. A lot of times they get value from meeting one another. And you say, bring a friend, right? This works exceptionally well with local businesses. If you're national, then maybe it'll be 2 or 3 times a year, but same concept. It works exceptionally well. We did this with all the gyms. And a lot of times, most people can just get their entire month of sales just from this referral event. Ongoing referral programs, this is just being consistent, just consistently talking about it and having special time. This is if you're consumer based, special times like double Fridays where you like double the referral bonus. I think we call it Fast Cash Fridays in the gym world. And so you say, hey, for the whole month of October, we're doing this. And if you refer them this Friday, you get double on it. So it's just like fun stuff. But that way, because if you do it at all the time, it becomes not important. So having some sort of like mini promotional cycle for when you push referrals just gets more to actually happen. And then finally, especially if you're a national business, having some sort of unlockable referral bonus that they get some sort of status associated with it. All of these things put together can build a banger referral program. And we're doing this because we need this cash that we're going to dump into this new pipe to get it live. So let me cover segmented nurture real quick. So with segmented nurture, HubSpot has this amazing statistic, which is that email marketing that is segmented gets like a 791% increase in sales versus people who don't segment their lists. And so whatever you're currently getting on email, if you only have like 1 segmentation or 2, you could probably at least double or triple the amount you're getting from email simply by saying, oh, we're just gonna make more emails, but we're not actually emailing more. We're emailing more specifically. So don't think about it like, oh, I'm spamming my list, because if you have 7 categories in the list, those people now just get far more targeted messaging and the response rates will go through the roof. And so these things, and the thing is that ROAS on email is one of the highest across all channels. Or it's not one of, it is the highest return advertising channel in existence. Right now, I think it's between 36 and 45, depending on the source you look at, 45 to 1 in terms of dollars in versus dollars out. And so from here, we get more cash. From here, we get more cash. This is from our customers. This is from our leads. And now we dump that cash in the second channel. So then you think, okay, well, what am I going to make my second channel? Like which, there's all these different places I could advertise. Where should I go? And so this is kind of my framework for walking through it. And I do this in order of risk or likelihood. So the highest likelihood, the one that you'll get fastest results on, will be your let's say you're advertising. So you're going to do the same core 4. You're running paid ads. Well, we're going to keep the thing you already know how to do. In terms of platform, you're like, okay, we're going to stay on the same platform and we're going to stick with the same placement. All we're going to do is add a new audience. So it's like, let's say you do Meta newsfeed ads, and all you're doing is you just add new targeting. That's it. Now, if you're like, well, we've already maxed out our targeting. Okay, well, cool. You've maxed out all that. Now we go to the next level. Okay, now we're going to go same core 4, same platform, same audience, but new placement. So it'd be like Meta story ads instead of Meta newsfeed ads, and everything else remains the same. And the reason this is a little harder is that it's a new style it's a new medium. So if you're not used to making vertical videos or in story format, things like that, or if you're on YouTube, it's like, oh, we want to have tile ads. Like there's all these different ad types. It's a bigger jump of skills to just do that than just find another audience you can hit with the same stuff. The third level beyond this is, okay, we're going to do the same core 4 still, but on an entirely new platform. So now we're running ads. We were doing Meta. Now we're going to try YouTube. Well, what's the closest thing there? Well, pre-roll ads are kind of similar to newsfeed ads because they're both interruption based before someone's consuming something else. And we're like, okay, well, we'll use that as our next targeting platform. And then finally, if you're like, we're on all platform, all paid advertising platforms, because you repeat the cycle again. Because, okay, let's say you have Meta completely maxed out and you just started YouTube. Well, you're going to run the same processing. Okay, YouTube, and we're going to do community ads, or we're going to do sponsored video ads. Like all of these are just different versions that we can add in, right? And once we've maxed that out, then we go to the next platform, right? Finally, we go to new core 4. And so what we did at Gym Launch when we went from Meta paid ads to outbound was actually the riskiest move you could possibly make. And it's also why it took us a whole year before it really got to 50% of revenue. And so I bring this up because hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. There's so many more levers I could have pulled that would have made us more money, that would have been lower risk and faster. And so unless you want to have your whole team trying to strangle you for a year, I would strongly recommend following this process, which is what we do now.
One thing I just want to add is that a lot of times people go to start their second channel, and the biggest mistake that we see at this point is that they take the same people that are running the first channel that's working and fueling the business, and they say, great, can you go start the second one? And so one thing that you do not want to do is split resources. In fact, we have this saying that we say, which is we don't put a new on a new, right? And so we don't put a new on a new, and we don't put the same person on 2 initiatives. And so what that looks like is if you have somebody that's really great that's running the first channel, before they go to start the second channel, you want them to backfill themselves, make sure that that person is able to run it and hit the same KPIs that they've been hitting, then put them on the new channel. The reason that we're not the biggest proponents of bringing in a new person and putting a new person on a new channel is because if the channel isn't working, how do you know if it's the channel or the person? It's very difficult to know if you've never worked with that person before because you don't know what they're proficient in. And so be very careful making sure that you're putting the right resources on that new channel. And I would say that all in all, you as a founder or CEO should probably be pretty involved in spinning up the second channel to make sure that it actually succeeds and you know if it's not working, what the actual problem is.
And extend the time horizon. It's not going to happen in 30 days. It's very unlikely. All right, and so at this point, at category 7, we went from more volatile lead flow because you only had one way to get customers to funding our second channel with a better referral process, more segmented lead nurture so we create more padding, get more customers in, get more cash flow so that we can make the investment that's going to take us 6 months, maybe 9 months to get fully profitable and spun up to the same level as our existing lead channel. And so that leads us to the sales, which is how we get people to give us money. And so the constraint at this level is that leads are getting wasted and you're not working them consistently. See, your leads are getting wasted. Very sad. All right. And so to graduate, you get better schedule coverage and you create a lead nurture checklist and you give top kudos for top show rates. All right. And so I covered this in one of the earlier ones. If this is the only video you've watched, I'll break this down real quick. But changing your thank you page headline to things that are more compelling, moving the scheduler above the fold is going to get a higher conversion rate. Changing to 15-minute time slots. We saw this at Allen. This is one of those things that people have the perception of a more accurate time. So 3:15 might work better than 3. And so you have a higher show rate from that. It also gives the perception of more appointments and more potential availability. We open up to 7 days a week. So if we're noticing here, like better schedule coverage is, and Layla talked about this earlier, but like the biggest difference in throughput all the way across the funnel between two businesses in identical space is literally the amount of hours per day and days per week that they have available. And so if you think about these changes together, that's all we're maximizing. How do we basically go open every day of the week, 7 days? How do we do as many hours as possible? And then within those hours, how do we have as many options for someone? Because people pick out of convenience. I had somebody ask me, at a workshop, they were like, hey, but shouldn't I try and like book some of the time so it looks like we're busy? I was like, no one cares. Like if the time they want is now booked because you created a fake booking, what an idiot you are. All it shows is that you have capacity. Like if I've got 20 sales guys, that means that only one of them has to have enough availability for the whole day for me to have availability the entire day. Incentivize setters with 3% of sales. That's just like an easy thing if you're not incentivizing them. Implementing automated reminders, which you should probably have at this point. These are why we're calling these the basics. And then we have manual reminders that are layered on top. Of course, pro tip 1, make sure that the automated reminders are clearly automated and that the manual reminders are clearly manual. And so yes, that means we buy all of our guys' iPhones because we want them to have that blue message. We want someone to know it's a real person. And when we connect the setters with the closers, if you have a 2-step sale, for example, or even if it's not a 2-step, like you want to have some sort of 3-way introduction. So it's like one shared message where there's 3 people on. They know one person, but then it's less likely they'll ghost because they're like, oh, I just talked to Sarah for an hour. Okay, I'm going to meet this guy, John, but Sarah has visibility and the person knows that she's kind of watching. Daily kudos, this is just making sure that you're praising the stuff that matters. It's a lot easier to get a 20% lift in show rates than it is to get a 20% increase in close rates. All right, and so I will tell you right now, you will get significantly more. All of this is nurture is okay once you have them scheduled, but all of this is to increase scheduling overall. And so if you put these things in place, you can often significantly more than increase your throughput by 20%. Bribe for show rates, this is just the t-shirt for gyms. What flavor do you want? What size shirt do you like? Like we like to have some sort of either or you can just give straight up cash, which is like, hey, let me give you a gift card to something that's relevant to this particular customer.
Actually, where we got this from was we had a gym that was a kickboxing gym. And they were getting insane show rates. I mean, I think it was like somewhere upwards of like 70. It was absurd. And what we found out they were doing is basically when they were booking the leads, they were saying, hey, great, so when you come in, do you want pink or black gloves? And they were like, what? And they were like, yeah, so if you show up for the appointment, we're gonna give you some free gloves.
Your own custom pair of gloves. And everyone's like, oh, wow. And then when someone has the gloves, they sweat in them, it's like, are you gonna not? It's like, oh, let me get, it's like, no, those are a gift to you. It's like, oh no, I'm not gonna sign it. It's just like, you feel horrible. Right, and so it worked great.
The only other thing that we want to mention is that if you have sales team that are texting people, they are sending reminders themselves. If you're a local business, make sure, this is such a small thing, make sure that they have a local area code. Because people are not going to likely pick up if it's an area code from Florida and you're in New York, or if you're in California, it's from Florida. And then the second piece to it is that if they're not local, you can get software that will, when they call the leads, it will change their area code to match the area code of the number that they're calling or texting. And so highly suggest doing that because it also is one of those like tiny little things that affects throughput way more than you would ever imagine.
You'll probably see this and be like, oh, well, for me to get better schedule coverage, I'm gonna need to hire more guys. Now this whole training is about just the functions of the business, not the people. But I would feel remiss not mentioning this one point, which is that, okay, well, if in order for you to do this, you have to hire 3 more sales guys. Well, if it increases your sales by 30% for your revenue, and if you're at this size company, that's a no-brainer. So yes, you might have to hire more people. Also, welcome to growing. And when these people come in, my recommendation is that they get low man status, meaning they don't get now you have all this coverage that has to get handled. So start the new guys on the worst coverage. If your guys are working 5 days a week, by the way, easy way to make more money, sell the other 104 days of the year. You pay rent, So have those guys start Saturday, Sunday, and then pick their 2 days off in the middle of the week. Maybe they take off Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever it is, right? So just little easy things that you can do. That way the new guys can work their way up. And for us, we like to do okay, the guys who are the top closers this month, they get to pick their schedules.
Something to note as well when it comes to the availability is that you want to think about the customer that you serve. When we were running Gym Launch, what we knew is that gym owners usually run sessions in the morning and in the evening. And so they actually have the most availability in the middle of the day. Whereas a lot of other customers, if you're talking to people who have jobs, they might be more available in the morning and in the evening and not available in the middle of the day because they're working 9 to 5. So also you want to optimize for the times that work best for your customers.
And so that is sales at this level. We started with your leads were getting wasted and you weren't working them consistently. And so we put in better schedule coverage. We do the lead nurture checklist. We create kudos and kind of a culture of show up rate being equally valued as close rates, because at the end of the day, the dollars spend the same. So with that being said, let's transition to the customer service.
All right, so customer service is how you get customers to refer, retain, review, and resell. And so that is actually what we're going to talk about, because at this level, your customer service is only reactive, okay? It's all firefighting and there's no proactivity happening. And typically what you're realizing is that's probably not going to cut it, right? And so what you want to do to graduate is you want to create a proactive customer journey and communication so you can focus on renewals and ascensions. So here's what that looks like. When you're looking at what you want to input into your customer journey, okay, we talk about this the entire way through, which is these are really the 4 R's of customer service and customer journey. Okay, so when we think about retaining, what do we want to do to retain? We want to ensure that customers remain engaged and satisfied by delivering exceptional experiences and continuous value. Okay, so that's one of the first things that we want to optimize a customer journey for. It's how are we consistently delivering an exceptional experience and continuous value? I'm going to talk about these more tactically after I go through all. The second one is that we want to review, right? So we want to gather feedback through surveys and reviews, right? To identify improvement opportunities or what additional products and services can we offer people. A lot of the times what you'll see is that when people are complaining about something or when people are giving negative feedback, it's because you actually have an opportunity to create a new product or service, right? That could be an add-on, it could be an upsell, it could be something else to send people to.
And I'll just split this. You get feedback from the people who hate you and you get reviews from the people who love you.
Third is that you want to get people to refer, right? So encouraging happy customers to recommend your business by launching referral programs and tracking advocacy, okay? And the last piece of the customer journey is resell. So how are we going to boost revenue by upselling, cross-selling, or renewing subscriptions to maximize customer lifetime value? So essentially what you want to do at this point in time is these are all the things that you want to have happen. Now you need to make sure that these things are mapped out and you know how they are happening, right? And so, exactly. So a customer journey, what I recommend doing is that you have a line for each one of the R's. Okay, and so a lot of the times that we have, and what I've talked about in earlier videos, is you have one line that's talking about what happens for the customer, and then you have one line that's talking about what's going to happen for the employee. So what's the employee going to do? What's the customer going to do? But then what you also want to have is you want to have these things segmented out, because at this point, each one of these things is important enough and has enough, I would say, meat to it, that you want to have a line for each of these. So it's almost like I'm going to have, this is what my customer is doing at this point in time. This is what my employee is doing at this point in time. And now, what are all the things we're doing to retain? What are all the things we're doing to get reviews? What are all the things we're doing to get people to refer? And what are all the things that we're doing to get people to resell? And that needs to be clearly articulated in the customer journey. Now, here's the reason why. If you want to go from being reactive to proactive, you need a process. And so a customer journey is literally a process. Once you get the customer journey, then you can look at, okay, how do I actually train people to do things at these points in times? And that is when you take the customer journey and you're probably going to take it and configure it into your CRM, which we'll talk about in one of the next slides. And so the first thing that you want to do, though, is you want to outline where are all the areas that we are attempting to retain, attempting to get reviews, attempting to refer, and attempting to resell. And what you'll see is that a lot of the times you have a lot of missed opportunity at this point because you've been firefighting the entire time. You haven't switched to being proactive. But the thing is, your team won't know how to be proactive unless you actually show them what the journey looks like and what to do when, at what point in time. Once you have that clearly laid out, you can create triggers within your CRM to make sure that you're hitting all of these things.
In terms of making these triggers, 3 ways to think about them, which are all programmable. Is it a time-based thing? After X period of time, we ask for a review. After X period of time, we ask them to buy something else. Is it a behavior thing? Is it something that they do? Like once they've done this, then we go through, they check that box, then we ask for the review? Or is it something that occurs, right? So is it something that they do? Is it something that happens? Or is it time that elapses in the meantime? And so there's kind of like 3 different variables that you can consider in terms of making the customer journey and adding kind of like meat to it.
And what you'll notice is these are actually in order. So in order to get people to refer, in order to get people to resell, you need to actually make sure you retain people and make sure you're getting feedback from people. And so the one thing that I do want to advocate for is if you're looking at this and you're like, I actually don't have any of this laid out, focus on these first 2 first. You want to make it as easy as possible to get referrals and to resell people. This should not be like you're shaking people down for the reseller ascension. This should be like customers are banging on your doors saying like, I want to buy the next product. And you've done such a good job on 1 and 2 that 3 and 4 become the obvious next step. And so that is what you want to focus on at this point in time, is outlining this for your team. And then what this will help you do, which we won't talk about in depth in this video, but I will allude to it, which is once you understand all the proactive measures that have to happen, you can also look at who you need to hire for that division that will focus on being proactive versus being reactive. And you can likely segment the team into 2 teams, which is really having reactive CS and having proactive CS. So at this point with the customer service, we are all reactive and we're firefighting. And so we want to focus on creating that customer journey with the 4 R's so that we can get ahead and we can keep customers and keep them happy.
I had a company come to me at this stage where every system in the business was overwhelmed and the business was disorganized and they had stalled. And so what we did was 3 main things. Number 1 is we took their entire mess of different products that they were selling, and we looked at what percentage of customers were buying which suite of products, and then we made it into a simple A and B offer. And so that streamlined offer then created 3 efficiencies. Number 1 is it was much faster to onboard new sales reps because they didn't have to learn this whole suite of products. Second, the customers were far less overwhelmed because it was much easier to make a decision because they understood exactly what the offer was. And then finally, the delivery team didn't have all these different things that they had to learn and get trained up on, so it was easier to onboard, recruit, hire, train, and manage the back-end team. And so the result of all that was an increase in margin as we increased revenue, which is not always typical. And so that business was able to get an offer from private equity within 18 months of cleaning all of this stuff up, and was an offer worth tens of millions of dollars to the founder. And that, by no means I'm saying, is a typical experience or what you should expect or anything like that. But first off, if you don't have your own scaling roadmap, go ahead, click the button below and go grab it. All right, it's all customized to you, and there's lots of extra text that I have inside of them to help you scale. But if you already have one and you're watching this right now because you're looking at your scaling roadmap and this video was relevant for you, then I'd love to invite you to come out to one of our scaling workshops here in Vegas, where acquisition.com is based. And so what we do is my team will actually work with you, so my actual portfolio team, not like some facilitators that I hired off the street, but my actual team, because they want to get to know your business, because this is how we find our next investments. And so if that's at all interesting, you can click somewhere around here. I'm sure it's above on a banner or below this video. And you can apply to see if you qualify to come out to one of our workshops. If you do, we'd love to see you and help you scale.
From there, we're going to go into IT. IT is how you gather, store, analyze, and display information. Okay, so at this level, our constraint is that everything is disorganized. It's all over the place. And so a lot of times what happens is you get to this point and you're like, what the heck? Where is everything? Where's everything living? What are we doing? Where's our data? And you might have systems that exist, but like half your team doesn't even know they exist, right? And there's many times this has actually happened to me where someone's like, did you know about this thing? And I'm like, what thing, right? And so that is often what happens at this level. So what you want to do is, this is going to sound dry. This is going to sound really dry right now. But you want to look at network technology, bringing solutions to the cloud, getting a data host, and centrally locating hardware. Let me explain what that means so you understand it, okay? So I'm going to do my best. I am not a tech geek, but I do understand this well enough to explain it to you. Yeah, nerd, yes, okay. Okay, so AWS, this is a tool that at this point in time is probably something similar to this you want to look into, because what it allows you to do is store all of your data in one place, because that adds an extra layer of security and backup. So what this means is that if people delete things off of computers, if something gets lost on Google Drive, if your film that your media team has, something happens and there's an overload or overheat, you have everything your entire business runs on backed up in a tool like AWS.
Let's say somebody really hates you and has access to your customer records. Wouldn't it suck if they just went in and deleted all your customers? Wouldn't it suck if they went in and deleted all of the files of all of the media that you've created for 4 years, all of the logo, like there's people have more access. And so having backup or multiple backups, it's mandatory. Like you have to do it.
And I will tell you guys, like, I thought this was BS when I brought in an IT director and he was like, we need AWS. I'm like, this sounds like a pain in my freaking ass and I don't want to do it. There came a day where we had a company that built out like a custom tool for us. And that company, then we had to rely on them to operate this custom tool, but we backed everything up in AWS. That company went out of business. Suddenly we had no access to like half of our customer records that were in that system, along with financial information. The only thing that saved us was having this thing that for like 2 years I'd been like, this thing's a piece of, why the fuck am I paying for this? And so I say that because like, you don't need it until you're like, thank God I have it. It's basically insurance.
It's insurance, yeah.
Yes, it's basically insurance. Now going with that is just making sure that you're gonna centrally localize, that you're gonna be able to centrally locate all of your hardware. An easy way to do this is if you use something like Mac. Apple can actually store the computers for you and track them on your behalf. But in general, it's also great if you can keep them with one person in the company. This could be HR, this could be an admin, this could be you. It just depends on who you're comfortable with. But at this point, you want to make sure that all the extra computers, all the new computers are centrally located, as well as the phones and anything else at one person's house if you are remote. And if you are not remote, then it is easy to have them in a place in the office. Great, so at this point, everything was all over the place and disorganized. You get a network solution to centrally locate everything, and you want to get all of your hardware on site or at somebody's house if you're remote.
And I'll just add this in, which is like having some sort of organization process for how departments name things. That sounds like really silly, but how do we store, because someone new is going to come in, and if they have to remember something that happened before that they were here, that's not going to happen, right? And so then it basically means that you have longer and longer ramp up periods for new employees the longer you're in business, which means that you have a compounding disadvantage working against you at all times, which sucks. And so taking that little bit of friction is something that's called a local cost with a global benefit. And so naming things a certain way, organizing folders a certain way by department, those types of things, everyone in the moment's like, oh, I don't want to do it. But as soon as someone new comes in, and this is like how I would do this, someone who comes in and you have a really messy thing, you're like, hey, look around. Do you understand this? And you have it in front of the whole team. They're like, no, I have no idea. And you're like, guys, this is all of our fault. And sometimes you have to do these data projects where you're like, we got to go back, we got to clean all these things up and name them properly so that going forward, we can expand this team.
So next we have recruiting, which is how we find and hire people to work for our company. So at this level, what happens is that it takes too long to find good people and they get hired somewhere else because you take forever. You have too many roles open and you do not have anywhere to keep track of all the candidates and where they're at in the process. So it just feels like this giant mess. And you're like, why is everything taking so long? This is so annoying.
At this point, you should already have this in place. But you should already have a multiple step interview process. But now at this point, think about it. It's like you've got 6 roles that are open or 15 roles that are open. And you have some people, like role 1 is at interview 2. Role 2 is at interview 3. Role 3 is at screening. And you're like, wait, but you've got 4 guys in this one, and 1 guy's at interview 2, 1 guy's at interview 1. Across all this, it becomes an absolute nightmare to try and get this all organized. And meanwhile this is happening, all the good people are going to the companies who know how to run it.
So you start to notice things like, you're like, where's this candidate? They're like, oh, they had an interview on Monday. And you're like, it's Friday, what's happening? And people are like, oh, they've got an interview scheduled on Monday. And you're like, 7 days we're waiting? And so you start to notice things like that start to slip through the cracks. And so to graduate from this, you want to install an applicant tracking system. It's called an ATS, to keep track of all the open roles and where everyone's at in the process. And you want to pay specialized recruiting firms to keep up. So let me explain why these 2 things are important. So I think Alex just covered why an ATS is important because a lot of the times, and we've tried this, you can configure a CRM to also be your ATS, but it's never going to be as good as an ATS that's out of the box. Is there a perfect ATS? No. Is there a perfect CRM? No. None of these systems are perfect. So there are no perfect solutions in business. Just remember that with literally everything, including people you hire. But at the same time, we can at least be better than what we are right now. And what an applicant tracking system will be is like, think of it like a sales pipeline is for your sales team. When we talked about a few stages back where we're going to get a pipeline in place, it's the same for an applicant tracking system. It's literally a pipeline for talent. And so just like you have, your lead generation funnel, you now have your talent generation funnel. And so you need to formalize it by having software that helps make it easier. The second piece to that is that we're going to notice at this point in time when you're at this size business is you're going to have a lot of roles that your team sucks at finding. That's it. Is like you have maybe a recruiter on the team, maybe you use a general recruiting firm. As you move into 50 to 99 people, you go from a lot of generalists to having way more specialists. Well, to find specialists, right, people have very specific roles, they are harder to find because they have a specific skill set you're looking for, and they're not as general as the other people you've been hiring. And so what a lot of people do at this point in time is they say, you know what, I'm going to hire some more recruiters to help with these. And it's like, no. There are specialized recruiting firms that only find financial controllers for healthcare companies. There are specialized recruiters that only find, sales reps that are, selling things between, $5,000 and $10,000. There are specialized firms that find very specific roles, and it makes no sense to bring people into your team to recruit for something that's going to probably resolve itself in 2 years. So let's talk about how to select an ATS, okay? Because a lot of people, this is like selecting a CRM. If you get this wrong, it will fuck up your business. And so
And we have done that. We have done that.
Yeah, don't get it wrong. I've just banged my head against the wall too many times. Okay, so the first thing that you want to look for, and this is me as a founder saying this, like not as like, oh, I love HR and recruiting. Like people that love HR and recruiting, forget this. This is the most important one. It needs an easy user experience. Okay, if it's not easy for other people in the company to use, if it's only good for recruiters or for people that are techie, it's not going to get used, and so it doesn't matter. It's just like a CRM. If you go into a CRM and it looks incredibly complicated, you're like, how's my 19-year-old sales guy going to use this? He's not. He's going to use something else, or he's not going to use it. And so the same goes for an ATS. You want to find one that makes it simple, right? And it simplifies the workflow for the recruiters and the candidates and the people that are interviewing. Basically, within an ATS, you're going to have the people doing interviews using it. You're going to have the hiring managers using it. You're going to have the recruiters using it. And sometimes you even have the candidates using it. And so if we talked a few stages back, like Indeed has a built-in ATS. So if you use something like Indeed right now, you already are using an ATS. It's just built into the platform itself. But at this point, because you are finding more specialized roles, you're looking for people on LinkedIn, you're headhunting people, you can't just use an Indeed one because it's only finding candidates off Indeed.
When you have specialized firms, they're not dropping them in, like you have to enter them somewhere, otherwise they'll get lost.
The second piece is you want to make sure that it integrates really well with everything else you have. So I always try to find an ATS that's going to integrate with my payroll system, my HRIS, any other CRM that I use. The more that this can integrate with things that you already have and tools that you're already using, the better it will be for you. The third is automation. So you want to find one that can do resume parsing. So a lot of them now have like AI capabilities where they can parse the resumes for you, so you don't have to worry about doing it yourself. They can do interview scheduling. So they can prompt you to schedule. They can also provide open time slots to candidates. It's really cool. And then they also have AI-driven candidate matching. So they will basically save you a ton of time by going through all the candidates and saying, these are the top 5 that meet your needs the most that we think. And so if you can find one that has automation and AI built in like that, like please do it, because it will also, like, having more process at this point in time with the amount of people you have on your team and get in, it's going to protect you from people making mistakes. Because at this point, your recruiters are probably taking a ton of time reviewing resumes because you have a lot of open roles, and that is not the most valuable thing for them to do. So if you can use the automation, then that's ideal. The fourth thing is analytics and reporting. So you want a system that gives you actionable data on the hiring metrics and the recruiting performance. So you want to understand, how many resumes do you have? How many resumes are you taking to a screen call? How many people are passing the screening call? How many people are going from screening to first interview? How many people pass the first interview? Because just like a sales pipeline, you want to like dial in every step of the way. You want to be able to do the same with your recruiting. Because you want to find out, like, oh, do we suck at interviewing? Does nobody pass our interviews because like my team actually sucks at interviewing? Or are we passing people and then everyone gets nixed at the final interview because nobody's doing a skill fit? And then at the end, the hiring manager's like, what the hell, this person can't do this role? So it's like, you're constantly working through that pipeline like you would work through a sales pipeline. Until you have it in a system, it's really hard to do that. And then lastly is scalability and support. So you want one that grows with your business, okay? And has really good customer support and training, because that will save you from, again, having to hire somebody to manage a platform that does not grow revenue for your business. And so I always prefer to get the most amount of support possible. And the last thing I'll say is, like, you need to pick a system when it comes to people systems that scale with the amount of people you're gonna be hiring. So picking HR systems, picking recruiting systems, and not thinking, how many people are we gonna have in the next 18 to 24 to 36 months? You're gonna have to trade up again. And so you would like to pick one that can grow as you grow. Sometimes what I see people do is they pick a tool that's really good for small businesses or businesses that are below 100 people. And then within a year, they've outgrown it. And they're like, well, what the heck? This doesn't work. And I'm like, yeah, it's just the wrong tool for you. So make sure that you pick one that you have room to grow with. The second piece that goes with this is we need to pick specialized recruiters. So this is something that I have gotten really skilled at. And I think it has been the reason that I've been able to grow teams quickly is I establish a lot of relationships with a lot of different recruiters. Like we have a role come up and I'm like, Jimmy can take that one. Or, oh yeah, Ryan's really good at that one. And so I have a suite of recruiters that I can pick from. We have our own recruiters on our teams and we always have, but it's really nice when you have special hiring needs to know who to go to and who can give you great candidates. So the first thing you wanna do is identify the highest job concentration hiring needs. Like, what do you continuously hire for? Okay, for you, it might be like, you know what? I'm always hiring for sales reps. I'm always hiring for SDRs. Or it might be, you know, I'm always hiring for customer service. Or it might be like, I'm always hiring for coaches. Whatever it might be, you want to figure out what do I hire for the most? And does it make sense that I use a specialized recruiting firm for that? Now, why am I asking, does it make sense? Because there's one thing that's a caveat. If the role that you're hiring for is incredibly specific to your business, meaning it's not a role that other businesses demand. So let's give an example. Say you're a fitness and nutrition coach and you are looking for nutritional coaches that know keto. No recruiter is going to be able to find that for you. That's going to be something that you're going to have to find yourself. However, if you're like, I need sales reps, I need CS reps, I need IT people, then recruiters can help with roles like that. But when it's company specific, not job specific, that's when you have to say, okay, we might have to take this in-house and figure this out on our own. The second thing you want to do is you want to kick off the recruiter search. So before you can work with a recruiter, you've got to find a recruiter. And if you're not good at finding people, you might have a hard time finding recruiters. So the first thing you want to do is you want to search around and ask, honestly, for referrals for recruiters that are in the job market that you're looking for. And so the best way that I found this is I ask friends of mine, I'm like, what recruiters do you use? Have you used firms? Do you have any guys? Do you have any specialists? Do you have anyone that's helped you with event roles, CS roles, sales roles? So your network is the best place to start. The second best place to start is actually LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like the best place to find recruiters. I swear to you, if I post or look on LinkedIn for recruiters, like you don't have to have a following. They will find you because especially like most of the time, think about this, right? When a company isn't growing, the first role to get let go is recruiters. And so there are like recruiters are a dime a dozen in terms of contract recruiters because they hate the fact they get fired all the time. And so they end up just working for themselves and just being like a gun for hire. And so you can post, you can look for recruiters on LinkedIn. It's the best place to find them. The third piece is you want to look at their track record and results. So what you want to see is what is their placement success rate? Meaning when they receive a requisite for a job, what's their rate of filling that job? This is very important to ask for. It's the one metric, if you ask for nothing else, ask what their placement success rate is. Because you want to find somebody who has a high placement success rate. I mean, the best ones have 100. They're like, I literally don't, because they don't take jobs they know they can't fill. So the best people will have 100. That is absolutely possible because they know what jobs they're good at filling and they will be able to fill those jobs. The second way is to also ask for ratings and client testimonials. So a lot of times before I work with somebody that's a recruiter, I'm going to ask if I can talk to somebody that's worked with them before and ask, how are the people that they recruited for you? How are they working out now? Can you tell me about your experience with them? Because not only do I want people that can find the right candidate, but I want people that are going to be communicating along the way. Because recruiting is not, I just give them all what I need and then they bring it back to me. It's a constant conversation. You're consistently making sure that you're on the same page of what you need in a candidate, just like you would with an internal team. Lastly, you want to ask about the process and expectations. The main thing I want to hone in on here is you want people who are fast. Okay, the best candidates are gone like in 9 days. And so you need to make sure that your recruiter is fast. I will tell you that I pick recruiters most of the time based on how quick they are to respond to me. If they're not fast in terms of their communication, there's no way they're going to be fast with candidates. And so why am I going to use them? Because the best candidates are going to be gone.
And because so Layla said earlier that they will find you, right? Well, that's because you're a lead to them. And so how they work you like a lead and how they converse with you and organize the calls that you have is exactly how they're going to work somebody else who's a lead to sell you that person later and how they're going to organize those calls and set them up. And so it's just a really good, easy litmus test is what they do with you is how they will act for you.
100%. And the last thing that you can do, which I am a huge fan of, is try before you buy. Do a trial with them. Take on, say, you know what, hey, I'm going to give you one role before you commit to a contract with them or before you sign anything. Just say, I want you to find this one role for me. Make it a low role, not one that's like very important that you need for the business to survive. So you can kind of test them out. And that is recruiting. So first we had, it took too long to hire good people. So they were getting hired other places. And you had too many open roles and not an ability to track the candidates. And so we install an ATS and we get specialized recruiters to speed things up. Which brings us to HR, which is how do we reduce the likelihood that employees and regulators sue us?
Yay.
So at this level, the constraint is that there are too many different places for employee information and you have no data. So you have all these employees now, right? You're like 50 to 99 people. Like you have a lot of team, but you don't know how's everybody doing? How's everybody performing? Where'd this person come from? Did we hire that person yet? Is that person onboarded? When's that person starting? You have all these questions, right? And so you're constantly pinging your team saying, what the fuck is going on here? When's John's birthday? Does this person get a raise yet? What's going on, right? And so to graduate, we want to set up an HRIS. That is a human resource information system. So think about it like a CRM for your team. So just like you have the ATS, which is the pipeline, then you get a CRM, which is the long-term nurture, right? And that is an HRIS.
I just want to highlight this in terms of thematics, right? So we talked like, we put in ATS, so we're categorizing people in terms of applications. We put in an HRIS so that we can categorize the people that we have internal to the business. In terms of the IT, we had to put basically categorization for the information that we have within the business. And so at this point, just everything's disorganized, everything's everywhere, everyone is everywhere. And so all of these are basically putting in systems that we have to categorize all the stuff that's already happening in the business.
So in order to remain efficient, we have to make things easy for people. So what is an HRIS? What does it have, right? So it's going to store things like your employee records. That's the basic stuff. That's their titles, their salaries, their benefits, their performance reviews, right? It's also going to include your payroll and benefits administration. So most of the time, the HRIS will integrate with your benefits, or it actually comes with a benefits platform. So you can have the 2-in-1, and that is the ideal, and that is what I suggest. So it'll automate things like payroll, tax calculations, and benefits enrollment. All of that in one place. It also will have time and attendance management. So for people that are hourly and people who, when they want to take PTO and they've got sick time, has all of that in the system. It will integrate a lot of the time with an ATS, or it will have its own built-in for recruitment onboarding. And it will support all the onboarding and hiring workflows after you get a candidate in as well. And then performance management. This is my favorite. So this is actually the main reason that I ever got an HRIS, which was to monitor employee goals, performance reviews, and KPIs. So all this other stuff is important and you need somebody to do it, like a CFO or a controller. The last piece is the one that I think you pay attention to as the CEO or as the founder of the company, which is an HRIS. Usually you can deploy things like you can monitor and see performance of every single department. You can have performance reviews in the HRIS. People will fill them out. You can see who's filled them out, who hasn't filled them out, how everyone is rated. You can run employee engagement surveys. You can run performance review surveys. You can have everyone track their KPIs in one place. And so when you think about picking an HRIS, I always over-index on this piece. Because if you think about what's going to make the company more money, what's going to drive growth for the company, knowing the performance of people on the team. Because at this point in time, I remember when I didn't have one of these, what it felt like was I'm just guessing and going by what other people say. I don't have any data to support anything they're saying. And I also don't have anything to measure if things are improving. So like if one team's underperforming, I have no way to measure if their performance improves. And so getting this in place is really fantastic because you can have like a holistic view. Most of the time what this ends up with is you have a dashboard of your team's performance. You have a dashboard of how many sick days do we have this month? What's our performance looking like this month? What's our employee engagement this month? How many new people do we bring this month? How much are we spending on payroll this month? All of the information about your team is in one place and is life-changing. So how do you select one? Really quick, gonna run through this. Think about your business needs, right? And so I just talked about what I think your business needs, because if you're at this point with your company, that is likely what is the hardest thing. But you want to define any specific requirements based on your company's growth rate and just the type of business you are. Are you in person or are you remote? It's going to be a little bit different if you're either one of those things, because remote companies, it's going to look a little different because you have people all over the board in terms of where they live, versus in person, they're all in one centralized location. Next piece you're going to do is you're going to look at your options. So you want to find HRIS solutions based on their reputation, the features they have, user reviews, and whether they align with your growth needs. Again, just like an ATS, you want to select a system that you can grow with. So you don't want to be the biggest customer to somebody because you're going to outgrow that tool really fast. That's the mistake that I've made in the past is I've come on and been like, I love the fact that they're going to give me all this specialized support because I'm one of the biggest customers. And and then I realized that the tool is for small companies. And so when my company grows, I get punished because it doesn't work. And so be very careful that you can grow into it. Make sure it integrates with the current tools you're using. Again, your payroll, your accounting, your ATS. And then involve key stakeholders. Here's where everyone fucks this up, is that they're like in the dark, selecting platforms without bringing anybody in. The thing is that most platforms work. It's that most people don't work with them. And the reason they don't work with them is because you don't loop the proper stakeholders into the decision so that they can give you feedback early so that you can use that feedback to make the right decision. Because at the end of the day, any kind of platform like this, you're getting it so that the team will use it too. And you won't get proper data unless you get proper input from the team. And so make sure that you're involving key stakeholders. I would say like your executives and some of your directors, have them test it out, have them try it, have them use a demo. Now, I'm not saying that you should do decision by committee. We don't do that. But you want to see like if 85% of them say this thing sucks, it's going to be tough for them to use it. But if only 30% of them say it sucks, then it probably means it's a good platform. And lastly, you want to do is you want to test the system, okay? So a lot of the times people will pick a system and they're going to be like, okay, I hope it works when we sign up with it. No. You can do trial runs, you can run pilot tests, you can also get trials for these things. And so do that before you sign up for something like this and you commit to a year-long, something like this could be anywhere between like $50,000 and $100,000 a year even. And so you have to understand this is a big commitment for the business. It's also going to either help you grow and make it easy to grow or make it really hard to grow.
So I'll just add in here, the CFO, and if it's not, you don't have one, like you absolutely can negotiate with these companies. So like you're now becoming enterprise, like you're becoming an enterprise customer. You're like on the low end of that right now. And so it is very standard to not take their initial offer. Like you can go back and forth multiple times to negotiate how the rates are being charged, when they start, are there escalations, what are the fixed increases, like all that stuff you can negotiate. And so like maybe just this one thing right now will save you $25,000 a year. So there you go. But it's just like, please do that.
So you notice the theme for HR right now is when it comes to people overall, we need to get the right tools that enable us to operationalize the culture. This sounds lame, but the reason a lot of people's cultures start to collapse around 50 to 100 people is because they have a culture accidentally, not intentionally. And so what you have to do is you have to operationalize what's already working for you. Why are you already getting great candidates? Why are you already performing well? And if you measure it and you can see what actions affect the results, then you can keep doing that as you grow. And so that is HR. So there were too many different places for employee information and you had no data to work off of. So you're going to get an HRIS to make sure that you organize all of that, which brings us to finance.
Finance, how you report and manage your money. So at this level, the constraint is your team starts spending your money stupidly because you've kind of delegated a certain level of spending because you can't approve every single thing that gets spent every day because you're spending money all over the place because you're growing, right? And so to graduate, we put in quarterly expense management. You start creating budgets by department. You have cards with limits that the leaders can have. Sometimes even, managers will have cards that they get specific with, specific things they can spend money on. You can have pre-approved, like you're allowed to spend on a, regular basis for this stuff up to here, right? And then I also like to throw this in, add insurance coverage and get fancier projections. All right, so let's break this down. SOPs.
So at this point in time, this is just an example of something that we have, but we need to start putting in processes to protect us from risk. And so at this point, because you have so many people with their hands in the pot, in terms of like, you've got now executives, you then have directors, they're all needing to spend money to grow their departments in some way, whether it's technology, it's stuff for their team, it's employee swag, it's flights and hotels, it's equipment. And the thing is that you don't want to be the bottleneck by saying, oh, I approve and deny every single expense. Instead, you need to take everything from your brain around how you make financial decisions and you need to take it out of your brain and into an SOP. And so when SOP is a standard operating procedure, so this is an example of what I've created so that I know these people in these positions with these names that you will not know have these areas of oversight that they can make financial decisions so they can spend up to $10,000 without my approval on these things in these categories, right? And so they all have credit cards and they can use those credit cards to spend up to $10,000, right? Which then has a document explaining what you can spend that $10,000 on. And then there's a process that if you want to spend money on over $10,000, here's what you've got to do to get it approved by Layla. That's how you will manage expenses. So then their credit cards can tie to the standard operating procedure. And on the other side of that, you want to use that to also create a budget for each department. So it's hard to create a budget when you don't know what people spend. And so oftentimes people try to create a budget before they see how much is needed to run the department. What I will say is this, is that I will get the departments in place, and then I will look at what is being spent. I will, prune to make sure that we're not spending on the wrong things and we are spending on the right things. And then I will use that to help inform of a budget.
You doing this, by the way, just like actually, and this is like a couple days project. Like this is not a huge lift, but you will almost invariably save yourself a ton of money because you'll find out when you go in how much stuff is being spent yet again. And so there are some problems that are just recurring that never get solved. Like you will always have to manage expenses because they tend to grow. You will always have to manage focus because like opportunities sprout like weeds, right? You have to weed them out so you can keep all the water and all the nutrition on the one tree that matters, right? And so this is not a problem that will ever get solved. It's just that you have to manage it. Right off the top, you're going to assign your people managers or whoever the leader is in the department with a specific budget. And because long term, because we'll see where this gets to, all the leaders of these departments in a level or two are basically going to be running their own mini company at that point. And so it's like they have basically their own little mini P&L. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. All right, so that's that. Letting market, this is me putting this in, which is let marketing spend as much money as they want as long as it's within these KPIs, these metrics of profitability. So one of the things that always drove me nuts is like, I would have like CFOs come in like when we were interviewing, they're like, so how do you think about marketing budgets? I was like, oh, as long as when we put $1 in, more than $1 comes back. The limit is spend as much money as we can until something else breaks. And so typically I don't think in our career we've ever been limited by marketing. We've always had to basically throttle it based on other demands of the business that were constraining us. Next one, just having card limits, just limits your downside as a business owner. So obviously you give them the budget, but I also like having the hard budget there. Doesn't necessarily need to be the same thing because you don't have to like, okay, now this person asked for this higher spend. Now I have to like call the company, increase it's just like kind of a pain. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a level of trust that has to be there.
Yeah, you should really look into getting a really good credit card program because a good credit card program, you can individually select how much each person on your team is able to spend on a credit card. So departments like marketing, you could make it, millions of dollars a month depending on your P&L and if your business can support it. Other departments where somebody only needs to spend $15,000 a month, you can limit it to that. And so, don't just go with the credit card program that your bank has because oftentimes they are shit. Go with a custom credit card program. Look at flexibility as one of the main things. I would say that most of the time what business owners are frustrated with these programs is that they're not flexible enough. And so it's like you cannot raise the limit of the marketing department without raising it of all the rest of the departments. Or they require a ton of manual approvals to get things raised or money transferred to one card or another.
And looking at, because now we're kind of in the expense side, right? Like if you look at where all your money goes, you'll be able to match credit cards that give points or rewards for that. So if you do a lot of travel, then there's probably a lot of like entertainment and travel that will be covered and that you get double points or triple points on. Now, that sounds small, but when you're spending millions of dollars a year, 3% adds up. Sometimes it's a full-time role. So, I mean, I'm all for like one decision that pays me forever. And so I kind of put this in one of those buckets. Like it's not a lot, but it's like you make it once and then you get dividends kind of ongoing because of that. Next point here, fancy projections. So typically to get fancy projections, we have to graduate. We've got to be a little bit more professional. And getting a full-time person is usually required at this point in order to do that. We're not talking too much about people here, but that usually tends to happen at this point.
Yeah, and so what projections look like is not just what's the business going to grow into, but also what are our operating expenses going to be over the next 12 months. At this point, people need to know, like, how much can I spend in my department? And some people you find spend too much, but a lot of people actually don't spend enough. They don't invest in their departments because there's no budget. And so I actually see a budget at this point, having an operating plan with projections that leads to a budget as being how you can give your team autonomy to help invest in their teams if you give them a certain amount of money that they have to spend. And so as much as we say, like, sometimes people spend too much, actually a lot of people don't spend enough because they're so afraid of spending money. At least the best teammates tend to fall into that category.
You have people who just spend way too much money who are like, oh, this is free. It's not like company money. It's like, no, it's still my money. It's me. Like, I buy you dinner, same money. Like, don't act that way. And then you've got the other people who are like, oh, I didn't want to spend it because it was $500. And you're like, dude, you're spending 10 hours a week on this thing and we could solve this for $500. Like, this is ridiculous, right? And so there's very rarely people in the middle. And so like you have to rein these people in, and these ones you have to like encourage and be like, we need to think about this in terms of how much dollars is it costing us to not have this thing, and then just do a dollars and cents opinion on it.
And the next thing you want to think about is that a lot of the people that you're recruiting at this point in time, especially for directors and executives, they come from companies where they're given a budget. And so when they don't have one, they don't really know how to spend money, which when you think about money, it's a resource for them. And so if they don't know how much of a resource they have, it's really hard for them to make decisions.
And they'll solve problems relative to that budget. So it's like if you have a $50,000 budget, you might be able to solve something significantly better. But if you only have 10, now I'm all for being creative with constraints, but you do think of different solutions, and sometimes some solutions are better. It's buy nice or buy twice oftentimes. And the last point is that as you get bigger, you will have more exposure. We talked about cyber in some of the past stages, but you will probably have unique exposures to your business that you will want to insure around. And so as exposure increases, for me, I like to limit downside. And so with that being said, we started with your team spends your money really stupidly. And then you get into quarterly expense management. You start doing budgets by department. You put cards with limits for all the kind of the directors and managers. And then you have an expense approval process, which Layla went over. And then you add coverage to your insurance and get fancier projections. Notice how these are getting longer as the company gets bigger. All right. And so at this thing, bottom line is that your constraint is that everything is disorganized. And to graduate, you have to start triaging everything and basically putting them into buckets. All right, that's all we're doing. Is we're just like, okay, let's just organize this stuff. Now we're getting into the 100 employee range. So we go from categorizing / organizing everything into specializing. And so that is what we begin in the next one. And if this was a video that you randomly got to because you clicked around on the page, which is fine, we have custom $100 million scaling roadmaps that we will make for you for free for your business to walk you through this. All right, and so inside you'll have more details about that stage, what to expect, what to prepare for, and we'll also give you both stages, kind of one before and one after. So the one before is like, all right, I definitely want to make sure I checked all this stuff off. And the stuff that's after is like, okay, I have a line of sight to what's going to happen next. And so big picture, these are themes. You might notice that your advertising is ahead or it's behind. And so it's just that the further behind a department is, the more likely something bad could happen. And so think of these again as they're not absolutes. There are continuums that exist in all of these departments across all functions. So if you want this, it's free. You can click the button below. Otherwise, let's get to the next stage.